let me paint you a picture. So you just got done reading what is considered to be the greatest, if not one of the greatest, mangas ever written, ever to have been created, called Kentaro Miura's Berserk. And you're like, holy shit, I just caught up to one of the greatest reads ever. What do I do now? My heart is empty. Well, if you've caught up to Berserk in the last couple of months like I did, you're like, okay, cool, the next chapter is just a month away. I can wait that long. But let's say you caught up to Berserk a year ago, right before the announcement of the tragic passing of Kentaro Miura. And you're like, what do I do? Well, you'll be recommended mangas for sure. Vinland Saga, Kingdom, of course, Vagabond, Vinland Saga again, just for good measure. And you're like, yeah, cool, I'll read that. But during some of those recommendations, there might be one recommendation that might get you slightly more curious than the rest, but I'll put it aside. Why? Because it's supposed to be a shonen manga. They tell you, oh, Shonen Berserk, bro, it's so cool, it's really well done, but it's not as good as Berserk, but it's just like, and then you're like, okay, cool, I guess, fine, cool, and then you forget about it. And then you read Vagabond, and then you read Kingdom, and then you read Vinland Saga. You might even dabble in a little bit of Tokyo Ghoul, and you think every single shonen manga is trash without having actually experienced any shonen manga, and you've only seen Naruto when you were a kid, or Dragon Ball Z, and you're like, yeah, that's only for kids who actually watches and reads shonen manga. And so you miss out on what I consider to be one of the greatest mangas ever created in Shonen Jump's history. A manga that I would genuinely call a masterpiece. Yes, my friends, I am talking about Claymore, the manga that I personally refused to get into for a long time because it just never seemed like it could live up to the hype that they were creating for it. Nor did I ever think that it could ever feel like Berserk. Because, after all, one is a shonen manga, the other is literally the god of seinen manga. How can these two ever feel similar? But then I read Chainsaw Man. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess shonen can do some crazy wild-ass shit. It's not just about, it's not a genre, right? It's about demographics, right? And then I got into Attack on Titan, of course. And then I was reminded that Attack on Titan is not a seinen, it's actually a shonen. And then my mind grew as to what you consider to be a shonen and what a seinen is, because the lines are very, very thin now. So after my first time actually reading all of Berserk, where I actually caught up to the latest chapters, I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to take the plunge because I've read Vagabond before. I've read Kingdom before. Granted, only like the first 500 chapters, but I think that's enough. I've seen Vinland Saga anime and I can't wait for season 2, which looks fantastic. I've gotten down the usual recommendations. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually take into consideration the recommendation of this Claymore series. All right, let's see what this is about. And I finally took the plunge and started reading chapter 1 of Claymore. And you guys won't believe what I experienced. I experienced a very, very average chapter 1. It was okay. It was nothing crazy. Like, honestly, it was very mid. To be honest with you, it's like super mid. But then I kept going and oh my god! What's up, everybody? My name is Buzzard, and today we're going to be talking about a manga that you probably have not read. If you have read it, please let me know down in the comments below about your wonderful time with Claymore, because I know that you had a wonderful time, because it's a great, great manga. Now, before I continue on, please leave. If you've not read the manga, please read it and come back if you were already sold on the concept by me. But if you're not sold yet, just based on my word, well, it is what it is. I won't take it personal. Instead, what I will do is I will explain more about Claymore to you so that you feel like there is something that you can actually get into. Now, the biggest question of all, the biggest question that I wanted to answer, is it like Shonen Berserk? The answer is absolutely not, but in a very small way, yes. But that small way could be the most important way, so it's just a little confusing, so let me break it down. Now, Is it gonna be similar in character writing as Berserk? No. Is it gonna be similar in plot as Berserk? No. Is it gonna be similar in themes as Berserk? No. Is it gonna be similar in art style as Berserk? Well, some of the monster designs are very, very slightly similar, but overall, no, definitely not. So what the fuck is the similarity then between Claymore and Berserk? Well, it's a very nuanced explanation, because the easiest way I can explain it is the vibe, is the feeling. So before I explain what that vibe and what that similarity is, let me explain to you the basic premise of the Claymore manga. So Claymore manga is based upon this one character called Claire, who happens to be a Claymore. That's right. No, a Claymore is a person who has the innards of a monster put inside of them. So basically, in this world, there exists these monsters called Yoma, Y-O-M-A, and they are like beasts who need to eat other, who need to eat humans in order to be able to survive. So how do you battle these creatures that are just superhuman, super powerful and everything? Well, you take the organs of these beasts and put them inside the bodies of women. That's it. That's what a Claymore is. A Claymore is basically a Witcher from the series, Witcher series, obviously. They're mutants that can battle monsters. They're mutants made out of monster innards that can battle other monsters. So that's the basic premise of a Claymore. So what this usually does is you need to get a small, younger girl, and then you need to do this to them. And in order to make them survive these experimentation, whatever the Witcher puts in front of you, where they say, oh, Witchers are emotionless, but that's not actually true. Well, in Claymore, it is certainly true to some extent, because it's always women that are broken emotionally completely that become Claymore. Now, not always, right? But sometimes they're just so mentally broken that they regress into the state of an actual child, like a baby, like looking for a mother. To be cradled by a mother. That's how horribly regressive they become in certain cases. But in some other cases, they feel very cold and emotionally distant. So that is where the similarity I feel with Berserk comes in. There are certain instances in Berserk where Guts feels just emotionally cold and emotionally distant. He just feels very lonely, and you can feel the same sort of disconnect with the Claymores whenever you get to a certain pivotal emotional moment with them. You can see how empty they are. You can see how much they yearn for actual real emotions. And I think the way that the Claymores are written is just supremely phenomenal. So hopefully that answers your questions about the similarities to Berserk. Now let's get into why I thought initially that Claymore just was not going to be that great. Because what do they tell you? They tell you, oh, you can't talk about other female shonen characters writing without bringing up Claymore. Oh, they're the greatest written female characters. There's literally nobody else that compares. Now, is this true? Actually, yeah. Like, honestly, I was not expecting that. I was just expecting, yeah, fine, whatever. You're saying that, right? But I don't want to think of this as competition, because for example, Nobara and Maki Mai, right, all of them, they're in a series which is extremely male-centric, and they just happen to be just as well written as some of the main male main characters, right? It's the same thing with Black Clover. Noelle is written as well as, if not a little better than, her male counterpart in that story. But you can't compare Noelle to the Claymore characters, because in Claymore, Noelle would continue to be a side character, because Claymore is like 99% of the cast members are all women. So it's not about, who better written women characters. No, if you want to talk about the themes that are being tackled, oh my god, Claymore does it so well, right? With especially tackling women's issues and stuff like that in a very poignant, very removed from obviousness way. It's very story driven, it's very character driven, but if you dig a little deeper, you can definitely find the intention of the thematic representation that the author wanted to have in there. It's very subtly but beautifully done. So that's the reason why I don't think you can compare the female characters from the other shonens to this shonen. But it's also a reason why Claymore is such an outlier, because it's not the typical shonen, it's not the typical, oh my god, I'm going to be the king of the pirates, I'm going to be the king of the wizard king, whatever, you don't get that. And on top of that, it's not a typical 15-year-old guy, no, it's a grown woman, right? it's a grown woman who's emotionally distant, who does some really violent stuff. So there's a big disconnect from the type of stories these are, which is why people say it's Berserk, Shonen Berserk, but I think they just didn't have the capacity to understand what type of story this is, because this is not your typical Shonen story. Because Shonen, rather than being a demographic, it has become a genre recently. It has become a much bigger genre rather than something that you would call as a categorization, right? It's more of like, what kind of a story is it? Oh, it's a shonen type of story. So what does a shonen type of story mean? Oh, it's a young guy, who has inside powers, who has inside an inner demon, or like, inner powers or something like that, and is like trying to save the world in some way or the other, something similar to that, right? But in Claymore, that's not the premise at all. You see, the story starts out with Claire, our main character, our main Claymore, coming to save a village because she's on a contract. She's not doing this out of the goodness of her heart. She's not doing it because someone personal to her died. None of that stuff. It is a cold, emotionless mission. It's a contract that she enters into, where she goes and kills this Yoma only if the village is able to pay. Not to her directly, to a different person, but still, it's only if they pay. You see multiple instances of this in the entire story of Claymore, where Claymores just won't, go through with their mission because the village just has not paid. So there's a big disconnect there. Like, what is this? Like, how is it? So people were not able to properly categorize this as another shonen manga. So they chose to call it, it's like Shonen Berserk, because they think seinen is equal to Berserk. And they thought the seinen type of storytelling beats that were used throughout Claymore made it a seinen rather than a shonen. So that's where the confusion comes when people think of it as a Berserk, Shonen Berserk, because it just truly is not. That's not the case. So let's get into the beauty of the story of Claymore. So, like I said, it's about Claire, who goes to a village with a mission in order to kill a Yoma. That's as simple as that. That's the basic premise. So what happens is she finds a boy, Rocky, in this village, and she basically saves him. But because of the world, because of how dark and dreary this world is, the villagers actually kick him out, because the Yoma in the village was actually somebody close to Rocky, and they think, you're infected, you're somehow considered to be connected to the Yoma too, and we don't want you here, so we're kicking you out. So you already know that this entire world is a very dark, secluded, it's not a very friendly world, so it paints you a picture already of a very bleak world. So what happens after this is Rocky tries to go and find Claire, and then what you get is a sequence of something like a brother and sister type of relationship forming between the two. While that is kind of questioned a little bit throughout the entire series, are they brother and sister? Are they like actually not sibling relationship? Is there something romantic going on? It's very difficult to tell, because Rocky is in puberty, basically. So you can imagine what Japanese manga would like to do with characters like that, but it's definitely not overdone. It's very, very subtle here and there, and when those moments happen, you're like, whoa, what, right? But once they're done, they never have to show back up again. So this is what happens. So you get a brother-sister, protector-protected type of relationship between Claire and Rocky, and they go on adventures, basically. They go and do the missions that Claire has been given. Now, what is so beautiful about Claymore is the way that it chooses to tell its story. So initially, we start off with these piece by piece, missions that Claire gets. Claire gets to go to another village, destroy a Yoma there, right? Claire gets to go to this holy city, which we'll keep coming back to, which actually is so, involved in its religion that it considers Claymores to be unholy, because they have the beast within them. They have these Yoma body parts within them, so they're not considered holy enough to be coming into the village, into the city. So what happens is Claire gets a mission there. She has to go in and do it, but she can't reveal that she's a Claymore, because if she does, then she'll either be hunted down or executed or just thrown out, basically, and she won't be able to fulfill her mission. And above all, fulfilling your mission is the number one priority, right? So the way that they build this city, the way that they introduce the characters within the city, right? And then the influence of Claire at the end of this mission, how that changes certain people. And of course, it's not just a simple story mission where like, oh, you go there and you kill the Yoma. No, it's a very interesting whodunit kind of a story mission where like Claire tries to find out who it is, and because she's not able to sense the Yoma because of certain other MacGuffins that are brought in earlier through the story, she's not able to figure out who it is just by sensing it, so she actually has to do some investigation. She runs into guards. It's a whole thing. It's a really, really well, solidly crafted story, and is actually the point that actually got me into the story, because until then it was okay. Like I said, Claymore's chapter 1 was very, very average, very mid. Chapter 2, less so. It was a little more intriguing, and then chapter 3 happened, and then chapter 4 happened, and then eventually when we got to a actual story chunk, I got a feel for how the author tells his story, and I really, really fell in love with it. So from this point on, not only do you see the relationship between Claire and Rocky develop, you see the relationship between Claire and Rocky and the citizens in the city develop. You know, the relationship to other Claymores, how that develops, right? And then Rocky gets lost. How are they alone, right? And then how Claire develops as a fighter. And then you get to know that Claire is actually, even through her absolute badassness throughout the entire story, you get to learn that she is the weakest Claymore ever made. And again, reasons for this is going to be big spoilers, right? Even the previous thing that I just said was a big spoiler, and if you don't, that entire moment was a big jaw-dropping moment for me. But stuff like that happens so many times where, like, outside of the series, if I tell you, you'll be like, that's okay. But then when you actually read it, you're like, oh no, I wish I could have experienced this firsthand. So if you're already, like, you know, feeling good enough about the series, again, please read the series and then come back. So other things that are super cool is the fact that Claire is not actually a proper Claymore. She's not a half Yoma, half human. She's a 1/4 Yoma, because the organs that were put inside of her were not Yoma organs. They were other Claymore organs. And yes, Teresa is, oh my god, I love her. I love her so much. She's so one of the greatest characters ever. And then when, you know, if you've read the series, you know what happens towards the end. Oh my god, so good. Such a great ending, by the way. I love the ending. It's a complete package, which you just don't see as often anymore with just shonen, you know, big shonen that are really good. They don't stick the landing usually. I mean, case in point, My Hero is just, I don't think it's doing a great job by the end. Fingers crossed, Black Clover does a good job, but Claymore really stuck the landing. Not only that, I think Claymore has a couple of the most memorable villain characters ever made. Priscilla, oh my god, her origins were a little weak, but the hype that they give her is insane. Is absolutely mind-bogglingly insane just throughout the entire series. And then the conclusion to that is just, oh my god, chef's kiss, beautiful. And you know that the author really thought out the entire like world, the setting, and everything so well, because there's one chapter towards the end of the story where the entire world gets blown up. You know, it's very similar to Attack on Titan, but it's not exactly like that, because it's not as plot dependent on you understanding the world, right, as Attack on Titan was. But this is still a big exploration of like, oh my god, this world is much, much bigger than what you can imagine. And that way it really like bulks up the world. You know, you don't just think, okay, you get some basic information of like the outer world at large, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the story as such. So you're like, okay, cool. And that's such a beautiful way to do it, because you just know that beneath the surface, you can feel at least that there's a huge, huge universe that is just waiting to be explored. But because it's not relevant to the story, we're not going to do that. But that is the way that you get inside the mind of the reader to make them think that there's like a lot over here, you know, which is absolutely great. And by doing that, not only do they build a world outside of the main area that we're located in, the entire area that we're located in is also very thoroughly built up. You know, you get the supreme beasts of the north, south, east, west, and then you get a reason as to why there are not any villages over on one side, because the organization is there, and then the intricacies of the organization, and then the reasons why each Claymore is given a particular number, and the way that the group dynamics work, the way that the Claymores are built, the endless greed of the organization to keep creating and creating and creating more monsters. It's so beautifully well done, and every single plot arc, let's say, is just crafted so well, because you get like 7 parts, 5 parts, 3-part stories, part being chapters, right? And then every single thing is just so well constructed, well paced, because you get to know, like, bam bam bam, story arc, story arc, story arc, and they're also tightly written, and sometimes they do flow from one to the next, but there's a very clear break, and it's just so well structured, and the pacing is also great. And not only that, the biggest highlight of the entire manga, right, it's not anything that I've mentioned so far, the biggest thing of the entire manga that makes me think that this is a masterpiece is the pure character writing, because every single character in this series feels like an actual person, with goals, with beliefs, with fears, with strengths, with different abilities, with different dynamics with each other, with different histories, right? The author goes far and above, and it's a very beautiful writing technique. It's actually similar to how the world was built, because you get very minimal information about the world, but you get just the right type of information to make you believe that there's a big sprawling world out there. And it's the same thing with characters. You're not going to get the entire life story of like 100 characters or whatever. You're going to get for like 5 or 6, right, with like really detailed character histories, right? But with just dialogues, with just interactions, with just certain hints here and there, you get entire pictures painted of who this girl was and what kind of a woman she became, and the problems that she's faced so far, right? You get a solid image, solid understanding of everything that the organization has put them through, and it's such a great way thematically, as I was saying, to actually use Claymores and the organization, because there's this one scene where, because ultimately one of the goals of one of these characters, again, big spoiler alert, is to actually take down the organization, right? But then when she gets there, she just cannot sacrifice her principles, because the reason why she wants to take down the organization is for the girls, is for her comrades. So how does it make sense to actually fell the organization if she has to kill her fellow comrades in order to do so? So she doesn't. But what does that get you? It gets you the respect of the other comrades who stand up and fight with you. It's just so beautifully done. Like, again, the execution of it is just phenomenally well done. And I just think, honestly, everybody should go and read Claymore, because as amazing as it is, it's so criminally under discussed. I think this is a series that requires a lot of discussion. I think a lot of these arcs can be analyzed individually. These characters can be analyzed individually, because there's a lot to unpack there. And this is one point that I want to bring up earlier. The themes. What do I mean by the themes? I think it's beautifully done, because the theme that I think is trying to be achieved in the story is the concept of the patriarchy, right? And if you're the sort of person who gets turned away by just the mention of that word, well, I mean, you can be completely woefully unaware to all of that and still enjoy the series, because it is something that you do have to dig deep into understanding, right? But if you're actually somebody who picks up on that stuff and you enjoy that stuff, when it's actually presented to you and it's done so fashionably well, I think Claymore is 100% the series for you, because the organization is run by men, right? And the world of men is what is waging war outside of their continent. But that's not their problem. The women have been chosen to fight the war of men. Women have been chosen to basically act like puppets for these men, right? It's the patriarchy that's controlling the lives of these women, using them as rag dolls, manipulating them emotionally, breaking them emotionally, and just using them as weapons, right? And not letting them decide on their own, completely indoctrinating them. And like beautiful, exploration of internalized misogyny as well for some of these women, right? Like who are so loyal to the organization, and the level of effort that you need to bring them out of it, that indoctrination. It's so subtle, but if you're able to understand what the author was going for, it's so well done. I cannot stress enough how good the writing is in Claymore. But guys, I think I've spoken enough about Claymore. Let me know if you want me to do more in-depth videos on certain topics within the story, and let me know if you enjoyed a video like this, because I might just expand from just Black Clover and do some other stuff that I'm really passionate about. I think I might just do that regardless. But if you're interested, please go check out Claymore and then comment back under my video video as to what you thought of it. And if you want me to make more content like this, definitely subscribe and hit the like button, because that is how I will know. But with that said, my name is Buzzard, and I will see you guys later. Bye bye.